If you're going after whales, huge deals, I'm going to say it's more important to bake authority into your cold email because if you send 3 well-written cold emails this week, you could hit your quota for the quarter.
Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
Hey, and this is Jack from emailsthatsell.com. Have you used cold email to make yourself famous yet? I'm not talking about Hollywood famous, but known to everyone in your market. If not, by the end of this cast, you'll want to use cold email a bit differently because sales gets a whole lot easier when your audience knows and trusts you before you reach out. Things to listen for in this episode. First, why becoming an authority figure is a smart move for anyone, yes, including you. Next, how a few well-written cold emails can give you access to 80% of your market. The process I used for connecting with a top figure in the cold email space. And finally, 2 simple things you can do right now that will help you start building your influence. Enjoy. Today, we're talking about how to become an authority figure using good old-fashioned cold email. Can it be done? How do you do it?
That's right.
Why would you do it?
Why? Let's explore.
Yeah, before we get into how, it's nice to start with why. Let me kick this over to you, Jeremy. What do you think about this statement here? It's much easier to sell to someone if they trust you already.
Yeah, that's a given. Sales is about trust. So either you come to a service because you've been recommended that service or because you think that this is a person to go to, then, sales is going to be much easier.
Okay, so you're listening to the show, you're nodding your head. Of course, Jack, obviously it's easier to sell once they already trust you. What does this have to do with becoming an authority figure? Well, if you can use cold email or really any other means to reach your audience first, to sort of soften the ground, you should have a far easier time winning them over when you start cold emailing if they say, oh yeah, I recognize this guy. I heard him on the podcast. I saw him give a speech at this event. I went to his virtual summit. That really makes things a whole lot easier. And what we're really talking about is becoming an authority figure in your niche, in your small world of customers and prospects.
Yeah, the way I like to personally see authority is it's basically a reverse engineering thing. It's SEO for the brain. So, for example, in the SEO world, you're typing, a subject, and then you got a list of results. What I like is that when people think of something, they will think of someone. So it could be best entrepreneur. And then you're going to think of, I don't know, maybe Richard Branson or whoever, that comes up to your mind. This is what I mean by search engine optimization of the brain. So your goal to be an authority figure is like, when I think cold email, oh shit, I'm thinking Jeremy and Jack, That's the sort of thing that an authority figure enjoys. So whenever you need that service, you think of that person.
And just to bring things down to the concrete level here, let's go back. I think you'll have to correct me, but was it 2014 when you published Grow Your Business with Cold Email?
Yeah, actually, book is a fantastic way of becoming an authority figure straight away.
So maybe you can tell us, just to remove any doubt of the listener right now, have you received messages, and are you still receiving messages of people who found you through the book and basically said, yep, this is the guy who wrote the book on it. I'm going straight to him for all my cold email needs, basically?
Yeah, part of my ego would love to say like, no, they come because, they know I'm good and so on. But I know the truth is that when people read the book, then they think like, okay, good. He knows what he's talking about. The trust been built, and therefore in their eyes, I'm an authority figure, which happened to be the case for cold email, but it's not always the case for every book. But it's a very quick way to actually build authority building. Actually, it's not quick because writing a book takes time, but that's a good way of building authority very quickly, for sure.
Okay, so we can agree at this point that building authority works. So
yeah, and on top of that, you need to also consider that people need to know about your book. There's so many books outside. So I guess there is also a promotional part that actually plays a role here. So it's good to have a great asset that will pop you as an authority figure, but people need to know about this asset.
Let's transition now to start talking about how you can become this authority figure, how you can take an asset like a book or an article that you've written or a speech or presentation, and use cold email to deliver it to a large audience so that you become this authority figure, right? So the way I view this is cold email can help you build relationships with the people who already have your audience in their world. Once you, let's say, get your foot in the door using outreach with this influencer, if you will, you can then present something valuable to their audience. Maybe it's a podcast interview, it's a presentation, an article, and boom, just like the story about you writing your book, Jeremy, this will elevate you a little bit higher up so that you've got some authority gaining ground. Is this what we're talking about when we say using cold email for establishing yourself as an authority figure?
Cold email is just a mean. There's so many other ways of promoting and building the authority. So I guess there's two cases. There's the first one when you have an asset and then you need other people to know about it. And then using cold email makes a perfect sense. It's just one channel. You could be using another channel, but cold email is a very good channel to go straight to the people that you want to see you as an authority.
Yeah.
But you do also have a different way of using cold email with absolutely nothing but the cold email itself. And that's a case when you say like, hey, we've been working with clients like such and such, which happen to be exactly, a mirror version of the person you're contacting. And I guess the way I use and built authorities as I was reaching out to people and in doing interviews in the financial world, then I guess that built up my authority. Like I could access and speak to some people that I couldn't before,
Right.
2 or 3 weeks before I actually could interview some people that were like, important in that world.
So I think we're talking about two different ways to use authority for us cold emailers. The way you just described to me is putting authority into your cold email. You take the presentation, the number of interviews, the number of customers, the big name clients you have,
Yep.
and put it in the cold email, and boom, whoever opens that will know that they're dealing with an authority figure to some extent.
Yep.
Method number 2 is using cold email to flat out establish yourself as the authority figure in your space by landing yourself interviews, presentations, guest posts, speaking gigs, let's say virtual summit presentations that anyone watching, listening, or reading will say, okay, yep, this person, just like they read your book, is the go-to. Maybe they have this mental SEO for whatever your topic is. And just curious, do you think one is more powerful than the other, Jeremy? Meaning one, putting authority inside your cold email or using it to generate it itself?
Hard to say really, because I think it will depend highly on what niche we're talking about and what are the assets you can leverage.
Okay.
Or what are the things that you can use in your cold email to build up authority. But there is another point as well we haven't talked about, which is like maybe a third way is having someone else promote you as the authority.
Interesting.
And that happens sometimes with some agency who actually say like, hey, would you like to have Bob on your podcast? Bob is really super cool. He's doing X, he's doing Y, he's been speaking at massive events. And you basically have someone else, and it will actually come across as very egocentric to some extent if someone actually does it for himself.
Right.
I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. To me, we can set that for the side because whether you pay someone to take care of it for you, I see it more or less of the same activity. But to me, going back to that question, if you're going after whales, huge deals, I'm going to say it's more important to bake authority into your cold email because if you send 3 well-written cold emails this week, you could hit your quota for the quarter. If your deal size are that large, then I'm going to say, yeah, you better have assets, you better have names or a testimonial or figures that you can drop into your cold email so that these big clients, prospects you're going after, know who they're dealing with. But let's put ourselves in the shoes of someone who has a smaller client. Maybe they're selling a book. Maybe they have a small course or a mini service that really you're dealing with hundreds of customers that need to be found. And if that's your case, I'm going to say becoming an authority in the industry, in the vertical, in the niche itself is going to be more important for you just because outbound is going to make a whole lot more sense if you can target it at these VIP influencers where a couple of well-crafted emails and boom, you've just got yourself in front of 250,000 potential customers. I'm thinking it matters on deal size.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's a good way of seeing that. I was also thinking that you could also use a signature to kind of like merge both. So if you go after whales and then you have like a well-crafted email, I don't think it hurts in your sort of signature to say like author of book X.
Not at all.
You know?
I think that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
People do that as well, where they have a headshot on LinkedIn or a signature where they're speaking. And by the way, these are very easy to replicate. Just hop up on stage after the next event you go to, grab the mic and have someone take a shot with their iPhone and you kind of got it. Cheap trick.
I used to have this picture actually of me, speaking at an event, and I actually just changed it with a more professional mugshot.
Okay.
I don't know.
So
we'll see. I'll let you know in a few months, if it changes anything.
Yeah, we could revisit, although that sounds difficult to peg down what's the impact. However, I want you to tell us a little bit about your web summit, because to me, this is the most concrete example of using outbound to really just drum up a lot of buzz and authority within the space. How did you use outbound to launch a summit?
All right. So when we're talking about the summit, which is basically a series of interviews of high profiles, high figures, it's very similar to me, in my view, as doing a podcast interviewing, other people. In the case of the summit that we've done, there is two distinct activities that you can perform with outbound. The first one is to make sure you're contacting the industry experts based on a topic that you want to do on your summit. So in your case, that was like B2B, SaaS businesses, founders and VPs and stuff. And the second side is obviously how you're going to promote that, because other people need to also be able to hear about that.
Find it.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's not because you find, the best people that suddenly you're going to have like a massive crowd that needs to know about it.
The 2 points you just brought up, number one, make sure you're contacting industry experts. And number two, make sure you promote it so your audience finds it. I'm looking at these 2 points and I'm thinking outbound alone can probably take care of this for us. Are we missing something, or do we have to expand channels? I'll give you an example. Making sure you're contacting industry experts. Once you've narrowed down the list of the right people to go after, in my book, you've got kind of two options to start this conversation. You're reaching out with a classic cold email. You're using maybe a LinkedIn message, or both. The way you put it together, was one more effective? Did you try anything else besides cold email?
No, so we used quick mail. Getting speakers was actually pretty darn easy. So we use quick mail, and regularly we changed the copy in order to include like, by the way, we got Jason Cohen, speaking, or by the way, we got,
Smart.
Just dropping good names. And by the way, I'm a big fan of him. He's been like super good. And by the way, the interview was awesome. But anyway, the other side is a little bit trickier, because now the other side means you need to find pockets of audience that would be interested in promoting them to their own list. So it becomes like a slightly different game when it comes to that. It's almost like a derivative. You actually don't contact directly the people interested in, but you actually contact the people who have access to that audience, and it becomes like a different game.
You go one level up.
Yeah. And they have obviously like different incentive, where the end audience, have an incentive about like, what value am I going to get as a viewer?
Yeah.
The influencer, or the people having access to this tribe, have a different incentive. They don't really care that much that this is a great interview. They care more about how is that going to resonate with my audience? Is that going to make me look good? Am I going to get financially better? Is that, there's plenty of things that comes into play that has nothing to do for the final viewer.
I think you're on the track here, because I've seen a case study where somebody was trying to draw attendees to a webinar, and this person used cold email to go after potential attendees of this webinar. And so imagine, I don't mind sharing the whole process, but it was basically they went to Quora, found people interested in a particular topic. They found their work information, went to LinkedIn in order to grab their email address or generate their email address. And then one at a time, they said, hey, notice you're following this topic, thinking about putting a webinar together around it. We're going to cover X, Y, Z. Is this something you think would be worth checking out? And okay, nice, well-written cold email, but I think that's walking uphill. It's trying to, if you sent 100 emails and 20% of them join, you get 20 visitors, as opposed to finding one influencer who's got the list of people starving for that kind of information. Sending one well-crafted cold email to that person, to me, is just a far more effective approach. And I think that's the exact same one you just outlined here, is going after influencers and having them bring you the attendees, so to speak.
Yeah, for the listener, I just want to put like one small caveat. I think it's a fantastic way of doing it when you're still small and you haven't got product market fit properly nailed down. You actually want to go and then get manually all those people and go get them, one by one. Don't do a product hunt.
Why?
Well, because it will take time to iterate on your product and to really understand. You're in the realm of needing to have qualitative feedback, not quantitative. So you really want to go one-on-one, figuring out, having quality conversation with people and getting them interested and then knowing if it resonates with them. I think it's way more important at this stage than finding the audience or the person owning the audience.
Okay, so let's take this a step further. Let's say I've got 20 people signed up. I've nailed who I'm going after for the time being. I feel confident in the offer.
Then you can move up.
Then move
Agree.
up. Okay, but it's interesting. This may be worth its own cast on its own one day, but I'm thinking the earlier days requires the most involvement with the customer. So you would probably agree that if you're trying to find your very first customer, you want to sit down with them at a table and just watch their expression as you ask questions. And the next step would be picking up the damn phone and having longer conversations. And only then does more of a mass approach make sense, right?
Yeah, and it's not always obvious what channel is going to work best for influencers.
That's very true. And speaking of influencers, is there any other things that you learned with promoting the virtual summit? Because I'm sure people who attended now see the host of the SaaS Outreach Sales Summit, Jeremy, as the go-to for this kind of thing. Was it easier than you expected? What do you think?
You know what, Jack? Actually didn't really position me as an expert on cold email during the summit. I could have done a better job, but honestly, I didn't really care at that stage. I was more interested in having good conversation with great hosts, because this is something that I want to do on a regular basis. So I'm not playing the short game, should we say?
Crash and burn.
Yeah. I'm really looking into the long game. I want something like done every year and provide a lot of value to the listener. And, at some point it will come back, but that's not my primary goal for this specific event.
So it sounds like building relationships with these influencers was the primary.
I would say with the speakers more than the influencers.
Sorry, I'm actually calling them one and the same. What's the difference between a speaker and an influencer in this case?
In this case, the speaker is the one helping building the content.
Right.
And the influencer is the one having access to an audience.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Right, because let's say VP of sales at Evernote, for example, they may be great at presenting, but that person may not have a list or an audience that they can just send a bunch of traffic to.
That's right. I mean, most of the speakers were actually potential fits for QuickMail itself. So it's great for me to understand better, where they're coming from, and, having a summit and being able to ask them questions is actually pretty valuable for me.
So I want to leave the listeners here with some actionable steps, because hopefully you've listened up until this point. You know that it's a good investment, even if you're an SDR or a sales rep or just somebody starting a company. It's going to help you out if you can establish yourself as an authority figure. So before you stop listening to this episode, maybe we can give a couple of pointers for very next steps so that this listener can become more of an influencer right now.
Okay, so first step from me, small tip, actionable, tactical stuff. Actually do look at your signature. That way that's probably the easiest thing you can do without having to change any copy. You just go in your signature and then find the best resource that you have on a subject that if I read it, I'm going to think like, oh, this guy is an expert on XYZ.
Cool.
And if you don't have it, then, start building it. And it doesn't have to be so hard. It could also be like a curated list of the best articles. Like this is another tactic that some people do to gain influence and authority in a certain domain. Just become the curator. they find the best article on sales, for example, and then they become the de facto person who knows everything about sales.
Cool.
That's sort of things that you can think of. But look at your signature. That's probably the easiest low-hanging fruit that you can do right now.
Brilliant. I've got one, and it's kind of nice to keep in mind that becoming an influencer in your space is not as scary as it sounds. When you really look at it, the world you're trying to impact is relatively small, meaning there's probably only a dozen people that have access to, let's call it 80% of the entire marketplace. And I would start by identifying who those major players are. Who do you need to build these relationships with? And there's tools online that can help you figure out who's ranking for keywords. But I would look at top podcasts in the industry. I would look at most played videos about that particular topic. I would look at who's contributing to blogs and just find out where people are going that are in your space. And just make a short list of people that if you built a relationship with them could change everything for you.
An easy way actually is to look at whoever has been speaking at conferences, go and contact them because those people actually are, open to speaking basically.
And they probably will be very willing to give you a quote or an interview if you can invite them to speak about this topic that they're trying to further expand their reach on. The idea is you can offer something to these influencers from day one. But like Jeremy said, if you have a long-term play, you're not trying to just get a backlink and disappear or get an interview and disappear. But if you treat it like these are 12 people that are worth helping out, gaining favor, and really just figuring out how you can make their life better, I think the opportunity to be able to enter in their space and get in contact with this crowd you're trying to win over is going to present itself.
Well said.
Okay. So no excuses. Change your signature and start with a short list of the major influencers that can help you become an authority figure in your niche.
Oh, what do I do with this list, by the way, Jack? Do I just ask them for tips?
No. You need to... Okay, well, think about one example. And by no means will this question be answered in the next 30 seconds. This is a couple book and several article and several conversations long. But one small thing that I've done in the past is sort of how, Jeremy, you and I got to know each other. I just took one small step and joined a mastermind group that you had put together years back. And I contributed a lot and just generally, I tried my damnedest to make your life a little bit better by adding stuff and making the group successful. And eventually you were kind of like, hey, this is cool. Let's see what we can put together here. I know another colleague of mine who, whenever they want to put together sort of a collaboration with an authority figure, they sign up for a course that they take and just pay for it. And that gives you sort of the inside access to this person. And just like I talked about, engaging with them, being helpful, and things come out of it. This is sort of how the inside room works in strange ways.
Love it. And if you find out the guy is a jerk, just look at the refund policy first. You never know.
Well said. All right, go become an authority and tell us about your journey. Reach out. Let's hear from you at podcast@quickmail.io.
Love it. Thanks, Jack.
Great cast. Bye, Jeremy.
Hey, cold emailer.
Yeah, you.
If you got some value from this episode, give us a high vibe by sharing a 2-sentence review on iTunes.
Or Stitcher, or TuneIn. That works too.
It's a quick way to help other growth-minded folks like us find this podcast
so they can send awesome emails
and make everyone's inbox a better place. Thanks.